This video is sponsored by Dubby Jitterless Energy Blend. Click on the link in the description and use the code PackerMan to save 10% on any order. December the 10th, 2021 is widely regarded by many as the most powerful tornado of this current decade. And it's also going to be the most recent tornado that we've covered on this show so far. Many of you may remember this one. It was during one of the craziest outbreaks to ever occur in the month of December. It was a very volatile month of December in 2021. And this one was, without question, the most memorable and most powerful out of all of them. And it's one that has had a lasting effect even to this current day. I, of course, am referring to the 2021 Western Kentucky tornado, spawned by what is now known as the Quad-State Supercell. We're going to be getting into all that and more, so strap up. This is going to be one hell of an episode. This is Tornado Tales.
Oh, that is scary. The truck is, oh my gosh. Holy smokes.
What's happening, ladies and germs? This is the PackerMan, and welcome to today's edition of Tornado Tales. Where in this episode, we're going to be talking about the 2021 Western Kentucky tornado. Now, this is going to be the first tornado of the 2020s that we're going to be talking about, and at the time of this episode's recording, this is the most recent tornado that I have ever covered on this show. I remember watching the news reports about this particular tornado, and in fact, there's somebody who I race with online who was potentially in the path of these particular storms. Thankfully, he was all right. But when it comes to weird and completely unexpected tornado outbreaks, this is definitely at the top of the charts, because this particular tornado outbreak took place during the month of December of 2021. Now, as I have mentioned so many times in previous episodes, we have determined that tornadoes can occur anytime, anywhere. Doesn't matter what the time of the day is, doesn't matter what month it is, doesn't matter where it is. Tornadoes can occur anytime, anywhere. And big tornado outbreaks are typically not that uncommon, in particular during the summer and early spring months. But a tornado outbreak in December? That certainly qualifies as unusual. And what's even crazier is that there was actually a bigger outbreak that occurred a mere 5 days after this one did in the Midwest. And that one had 120 tornadoes. Whereas this one had somewhere in the neighborhood of 70. Which is just absolutely insane that the month of December of 2021 would have two separate tornado outbreaks, one in the Ohio Valley, the other in the Midwest. And I was correct, it was 71 tornadoes during this particular outbreak that we're going to be talking about. And the one that occurred 5 days later had 120 tornadoes. Thankfully, the second outbreak wasn't as powerful, didn't have any particularly violent tornadoes. The max rating from that outbreak was EF4, I believe, was the strongest tornado, and only 8 people were killed during that entire outbreak. So, at the very least, that particular tornado outbreak was not as strong. Certainly not as strong as the December 10th, 11th outbreak, because there were so many devastating tornadoes that were in the EF3 range, and there was a pair of tornadoes that hit EF4. In fact, that pair of EF4 tornadoes was actually part of a long track supercell thunderstorm. In fact, at first, the tornado that we're going to be covering today, the 2021 Western Kentucky tornado, for a time it was actually known as the Quad-State tornado, because it was initially thought that the two separate EF4 tornadoes were actually one long track. I mean, can you imagine that? Going through 4 separate states, starting in Arkansas, moving through Missouri, into Tennessee, and then into Kentucky. Can you imagine? And having the so many eerie similarities to the tri-state tornado. Having a path of over 250 miles. And it would have made it the longest track tornado in all of history. But storm surveys found that the majority of the storm's path consisted of 2 distinct EF4 tornadoes. And then there were 3 short-lived tornadoes in between that this storm spawned. So, the tornado went from being called the Quad-State tornado to being known as the Western Kentucky tornado. And the storm that spawned both of these strong tornadoes with the 3 weaker ones became known as the Quad-State Supercell. But this particular outbreak was extremely devastating. Had 71 total tornadoes, 17 of which were EF0s, 1 was an EFU, 29 EF1s, 16 EF2s, and then you get into the stronger ones. There were 6 EF3 tornadoes, and of course the 2 EF4s that I had previously talked about. But obviously, as it seems to be the case so many times with these high-profile outbreaks, and I've mentioned it in the past before, there's always that one. There is always that one tornado that stands out above all the others. And in the case of the December 10th and 11th, 2021 tornado outbreak, that was the Western Kentucky tornado. Now, it goes by other names. It has also been called the Mayfield tornado. And the reason for that is Mayfield, Kentucky was probably the hardest hit city out of all the cities that was hit by this tornado. It sustained a direct hit from this tornado, and it was basically wiped off the map. The damage to Mayfield was so absolutely just total. Like, I mean, when you look at the footage of all the damage in Mayfield, it's unreal. It honestly reminds me a lot of Joplin, which is, ironically enough, the next tornado that we're going to be covering on this show. But Mayfield was considered the hardest hit town out of all the tornadoes, and there's also something that came out of it that's still ongoing to this day, which we will be getting into here before too long. However, Mayfield was not the only town that was hit by this tornado. Casey, Benton, Princeton, Dawson Springs, and Bremen. All towns and cities that were struck by this tornado. Mayfield was the hardest hit, which is why it was also called the Mayfield tornado. But I mean, it's also so shocking because this tornado happened extremely recently, coming up on 2 years ago now. And looking back on it, it's like, how does a tornado this powerful happen in the month of December? Like, we expect powerful tornadoes like this, to occur during the summer months, during the spring months, sometimes late summer and early fall. But not when we're on the fringes of winter, when we're in Christmas season. And I think that's what also made this whole thing so tragic, is the fact that this was basically during Christmas time. You know, we're only 2 weeks away from Christmas at this point. And then something like this happens. It's absolutely insane. And as I've said in the past, these episodes are basically like cautionary tales. So that way, the events of certain events that happen during these tornadoes don't happen in the future. This is a prime example, and we're going to be getting into all of that. So, getting into what happened during this tornado. Even though this tornado cut a swath through western Kentucky, it actually began in Obion County, Tennessee, near the town of Woodland Mills, along Woodland Mills Road at 8:54 p.m. What made this tornado so absolutely devastating was for a couple reasons. Number one, it was a powerful EF4 tornado, actually a fringe EF5 tornado, which I'll talk about that. Number two, this was a long track tornado. This tornado actually traveled for 165.9 miles. Almost 166 miles across western Kentucky. Number three, it lasted for nearly 3 hours. This tornado lasted from 8:54 p.m. Central Time to 11:48 p.m. Central Time. 2 hours and 54 minutes. One of the longest lasting tornadoes in world history. That's insanity. And number four, more importantly, this tornado happened at night. And I've always long said the most dangerous tornadoes happen at night simply because you can't see it. And the only ideas that you have that there's a tornado on the ground is one, the roar. You can hear the distant roar. Number two are the silhouettes against lightning flashes. And those are literally the only times that you can even see a tornado such as this. So, this tornado was produced, of course, by the same supercell that had previously produced another violent long track EF4 tornado that went through northeast Arkansas, the Missouri Boot Heel, and northwest Tennessee near Reelfoot Lake. But after the dissipation of that tornado near Sandburg, the supercell would then produce 3 brief, weaker tornadoes. Now, I've said this before as well. This is a sure sign that this supercell was regaining strength because, it had just dropped a powerful EF4 tornado. And you would think, well, it'd just be burnt out at that point, right? And it would lose its strength and die out. But no, it goes through a cycling phase at times where it would rotate, regather its strength, and then it would start dropping tornadoes once again. And when it gets to the point where it drops smaller tornadoes, that's a surefire sign that this is a powerful tornado or a powerful supercell, because if it's dropping smaller tornadoes one after the other in rapid succession, eventually it's going to drop a big one. And that's exactly what happened here with this tornado. This one formed several miles to the northeast of Sandburg. Now, when it started, the tornado initially wasn't that powerful. It caused minor damage to trees and roofs as it moved through the north side of Woodland Mills, crossing SR 5, State Route 5. After moving northeast a half a mile, it crossed the Tennessee-Kentucky state line near the community of State Line, ironically enough, in Fulton County, which caused additional tree damage, and it was rated an EF0. The total damage caused by the tornado in Tennessee was estimated at $25,000. So, pretty minor damage at this point. But then, once it started tracking into Kentucky, that's when it started getting strength. The tornado eventually reached EF2 strength, which was powerful enough to tear roofs off of homes, damaging or destroying outbuildings and damaging irrigation equipment. And then, not long after that, the tornado would reach violent status and become a powerful EF4 tornado, and directly impacted the small community of Casey at EF4 intensity, where multiple homes and small businesses were damaged or destroyed, with some that were leveled or swept clean from their foundations. Now, let's be completely honest here. If this was still under the old Fujita scale, there's no doubt in my mind this would have been given an F5 rating. Absolutely. A music venue housed in an old school building was badly damaged, and the KC Volunteer Fire Department building was also totally destroyed, with the metal beams of the structure severely twisted as pieces of heavy machinery were tossed around. Of course, when you have a powerful tornado like this, it can take even, fire trucks that weigh somewhere in the neighborhood of 2 tons and toss them like toys. Like, it's literally nothing to these giant behemoths. Several outbuildings and mobile homes were also obliterated. One fatality occurred in Casey, and several other people were injured. After moving northeast of Casey, the tornado actually weakened a little bit, but still remained strong as it moved through rural areas northeast of Casey at EF3 intensity. So it was still a pretty powerful tornado, but it had lost its violent tendencies, at least for the time being. It destroyed barns, a cell tower, tore the roof and exterior walls from a house, and then the tornado moved into Hickman County, and then appeared to intensify drastically up to EF4 intensity and almost damn near EF5. I think the highest wind speed was clocked at 190 miles an hour, so just right on the fringe of EF5 intensity. And of course, it crossed US 51, where extreme ground scouring occurred in nearby fields. Now, like I said before, basically it's when a tornado basically sucks up all the topsoil in a particular area, and it leaves these like deep trenches. And as I mentioned during the Gerald, Texas tornado, there was ground scouring up to 18 inches, which is 1.5 feet. I mean, that's pretty deep, especially when you consider that it's up to a half-mile wide. How wide these so-called trenches were. So EF3 damage continued past this point, as homes and metal truss towers were destroyed. EF2 damage was noted as a tract into Graves County, closely paralleling Purchase Parkway and US 45, and it took aim toward the city of Mayfield. A house along Kentucky 339 had its roof torn off, and many trees and power poles were downed in this area. And then we come to what is basically the main crux of this story: the city of Mayfield.
This thing is coming up. It is on I-69 right now. Macedonia Church Road. That may very well be a mile-wide debris signature. It's coming up into Mayfield, okay? So, where are we talking about? Let's get some of the locations plotted on here, okay? So, it's going to come right up the Purchase Parkway. It's going to come over onto the west side of town first. So, western side of Mayfield, we're talking over toward the high school.
107 mile per hour gust just now at the Graves County Mesonet.
Okay.
Just came in.
Graves County Mesonet, and I believe that's actually just outside of Mayfield. Okay, so we've had a 107 mile per hour gust outside of this, okay? We're talking about over 100 mile per hour winds, easily over 100 mile per hour winds. It is coming up into Mayfield right now. North, south side, doesn't matter. Every part of Mayfield, you have to be in your shelter now. If you live out toward Mayfield High School, you're going to get hit first up toward the north side of town. You guys will get hit next. You have to assume that this is going to cut a large damage path across town. hopefully, by some miracle, it decides to do something else. But at this point in time, we have to assume that this thing is going to do catastrophic damage around the Mayfield area. Do we happen to has the National Weather Service gone with a tornado emergency by chance?
No, as far as I can see, this is still PDS, particularly dangerous situation, with the catastrophic tag. So
Okay.
everything that we've been echoing for the past several minutes.
Okay, so we're talking about, again, catastrophic damage with this. Yeah, so this is our brand new tornado warning till 10:15 for Graves County. Mayfield, expect catastrophic damage and 2.5-inch size hail. The debris ball is now coming into Mayfield. Send some prayers to Mayfield right now. Let's keep our friends in prayers across the area right now, and especially in Graves County. This is going to be a bad deal for us, okay? Where's it headed next? It's going to go right up Highway 58, northeast of Mayfield. So let's go down here and zoom in and track where this is going to go next. I mean, guys, this is it. This is the storm, Mayfield. It's right on track. We said about 927, 928. It's there. Next in line, it's going to go up 131 and 58. It's going to stay for a few minutes just to the south of I-69. As you get past, I believe this is exit 25 here, as you get up into Marshall County, it's very possible that this thing is going to go just along or south of I-69 again. So between Highway 58 and 69 here, that's where it is headed next.
Now, the city of Mayfield has a population of over 10,000 as of the 2020 U.S. Census, and is in the center of the Jackson Purchase, which is an 8-county region purchased by Isaac Shelby and Andrew Jackson from the Chickasaw people in 1818. And it was established as the county seat of Graves County in 1821, and the county was formally organized in 1823. So this was by no means a small town. I mean, over 10,000 people were now in the path of this absolutely powerful, at this point, EF4 tornado. The National Weather Service would issue a tornado emergency for Mayfield at 9:26 p.m. Of course, a tornado emergency is the highest form of warning that the National Weather Service can issue. As the now massive wedge tornado approached the town from the southwest, and it was right on a direct trajectory towards the city of Mayfield. And as it entered Mayfield, it regained its EF4 intensity, and numerous homes were damaged or destroyed along Cardinal Road, some of which were leveled or swept from their foundations. Trees in this area were debarked or denuded, cars were thrown, and mobile homes were obliterated. Of course, in a powerful tornado like this, even site-built homes, site-built buildings weren't going to stand a chance against this tornado. EF4 damage continued after the tornado crossed over Mayfield Bypass, which is US 45 bypass and I-69, where Mayfield Consumer Products, a candle factory where approximately 110 employees were working, was flattened. The large metal framed warehouse building completely collapsed, trapping many workers and employees inside and resulting in 8 deaths and numerous injuries. Allegedly, workers' jobs had been threatened if they left the factory between the first and second tornado warnings for the area. A tornado warning had been issued earlier that evening at approximately 5:30 p.m., and then again after the second tornado warning was issued after 9 p.m. Several other industrial businesses were also damaged or destroyed near the candle factory, while semi-trucks and other industrial vehicles were thrown and destroyed as well, some of which were left unrecognizable. We're going to be coming back to this here in a minute, because this is going to form the main crux of why the Mayfield portion of this tornado story is still ongoing to this day, because the workers' jobs being threatened claim. Yeah, there was actually a lawsuit that was filed against Mayfield Consumer Products in the wake of this tornado. But we'll get back to that here in a little bit. We'll circle back around to it here in a little bit.
Joining us now is Kathy Stewart Onan, the mayor of Mayfield, Kentucky. As you saw there, one of the communities hit the hardest by these deadly tornadoes. Mayor, thank you so much for your time this evening. I know you are incredibly busy and going through a lot, but we've seen these images, buildings flattened, debris for miles. You're out there on the ground. You're talking to the grieving families impacted by this. How would you characterize the devastation in your town right now?
It is utter and total for the most part. We spent the night in the city hall, the fire station are across the parking lot from each other. And of course we had no power, we had no water. And so when the sun started coming up this morning, it was like matchsticks. Our whole town looks just like matchsticks lying around.
And sadly, we are seeing some of these images on the screen right there, those matchsticks you described. There are also a lot of questions, Mayor, about that candle factory. At this hour, dozens are unaccounted for. There are reports that they were sheltering in place. What do you know about why they were there working through this storm, and what kind of warnings went out to the community?
I can tell you only what I've heard about them, why they were there working. Those candles are sold internationally. That is one of our largest employers in the community. It is a local began company. We're very proud of that company. And what I've heard is that they were there because of the holidays to have more candles to put out for the holidays. The warnings, I don't know what they were given specifically at the factory, but I do know that just personally, we had 45 minutes to an hour to watch from our local TV station in Paducah, Kentucky, to know what was headed our way.
Yeah, and just
now afterwards, the tornado intensified even further, reaching near high-end EF4 intensity as it moved along US 45 and tore directly through the center of Mayfield, resulting in widespread catastrophic damage throughout the historic downtown square, listed on the National Register of Historic Places for its late Victorian and Classical Revival architecture. Most of the structures in downtown Mayfield were heavily damaged or destroyed, including multiple large, well-built, multiple-story brick buildings that completely collapsed. Now bear in mind, this was given an EF4 rating. Why, on God's green earth, this was not given the EF5 rating is beyond me. Because if this tornado is toppling well-built multi-story brick homes and brick buildings, then I honestly don't know why it would not be given an EF5 rating. I don't know. Obviously, I mean, the enhanced Vegeta scale, it basically builds on the original by having 28 damage indicators. But let's be completely honest here, the EF scale has its own share of flaws. And there are some that are even suggesting that the EF scale should be given an update to include Doppler radar readings, like from mobile Dow trucks. You know, like the one that recorded the wind speeds of the Bridge Creek Moore tornado from 1999, 301 miles an hour, which is absolute insanity. But for some reason, Doppler radar wind speeds are not included in the determination of what a tornado's rating is given. It's only given due to the damage that causes, which I think is extremely stupid. Not to mention a little bit short-sighted. I think Doppler wind readings should absolutely be included in the determination of a tornado's rating. But that's just me. But anyways, only large piles of bricks and lumber remained in the hardest hit portions of the downtown area, and streets were left buried under debris. The large and well-constructed Graves County Courthouse had much of its roof torn off, its clock tower collapsed, and had some of its exterior upper floor walls knocked down. several restaurants, an indoor soccer facility, a barber shop, an automotive business, gym, bank, movie theater, health and rehab center, and many other businesses were destroyed in downtown Mayfield. You're honestly going to tell me this wasn't an EF5? Give me a break. Large meadow silos were crumpled and heavily damaged at a granary, and the large Mayfield water tower was toppled and destroyed. The post office, the city hall, the fire station, and the police station were also significantly damaged or destroyed, and the emergency operations center lost the ability to transmit radio communications. So, obviously, you can imagine how chaotic this would make things, because without the ability to transmit radio communications, I mean, the entire city just descended into chaos, basically. And it made search and rescue that much more difficult. 3 large churches were destroyed in downtown Mayfield, including First Presbyterian Church, a large and well-built brick structure that was mostly leveled. The First Christian Church sustained collapse of its domed roof and upper walls, while the First United Methodist Church's sanctuary, which was constructed of very thick masonry exterior walls, collapsed. Again, why was this not given an EF5 rating? I mean, it's pretty clear that this tornado was knocking down buildings that had great structure, was very sound in its structure. Why was this not given an EF5? I don't know. But a school bus garage, metal industrial buildings, and apartment buildings also sustained major structural damage or were destroyed in other areas of town. The tornado also devastated residential areas in town, leveling or sweeping homes numerous from their foundations. Many trees were also debarked or completely uprooted entirely, and cars were thrown hundreds of yards and mangled. Dual polarization radar imagery showed that the tornado had lofted debris up to 30,000 feet in the air as it impacted the city, or what is also known as the correlation coefficient. Basically, it's a radar that basically bounces radar beams off of potential debris in the air, and actually allows weather forecasters to see, if there's actually debris being lofted up into the air by a tornado and how high it goes. So the tornado had lofted debris up to 30,000 feet into the air. 30,000 feet. That's 5 miles up into the air. That's insane. As it impacted the city. "22 people were killed in and around Mayfield, with hundreds more injured, many severely." So, after it left Marshall, the tornado actually weakened somewhat. And it only produced EF2 to F3 level damage, and continued northeast along I-69 in Kentucky 58. A hangar and some small airplanes were destroyed at the Mayfield-Graves County Airport, and multiple homes were badly damaged. A church and a business were damaged nearby, and further weakening occurred further to the northeast, where there was only EF0 and EF1 damage to trees and structures, as noted. So it seemed like that this tornado was starting to peter out. And then the Quad-State Supercell, which seemed to have a mind of its own, decided, nah, I'm not done yet. And all of a sudden, the tornado re-intensified. This is something that we've seen in various tornadoes in the past, where they would be at like F5 strength and weaken somewhat, and then all of a sudden, bam, they're right back up to EF5. And this was the case once again, where this tornado actually weakened to damn near EF0 intensity. And then all of a sudden, bam, it just regains its strength once again. And it approached and crossed the Marshall County line along I-69, moved to the north through the northwestern and northern outskirts of Benton, damaging or destroying many homes, garages, and outbuildings, downing numerous trees and power lines, and flipping RV campers that were in the area. Most of the damage to this section of Marshall County ranged from EF2 to EF3 intensity, though a few homes in the southwest of Benton were leveled or swept from their foundations at high-end EF3 strength. Damage continued through the Brazenburg community at EF2 intensity, where homes near and along US 68 sustained partial and total roof loss, outbuildings were damaged or destroyed, and a metal truss transmission tower collapsed. Past Bryansburg, EF3 damage was noted along Lowry Road, where a poorly anchored home was leveled, and a few other homes sustained EF2 damage along this segment of the path. But then, as it approached Cambridge Shores, the tornado again reached EF4 intensity. So it just seems like this tornado, much like the storm that spawned it, had a mind of its own, where it's approaching another town, and it's like, oh, got another town, and just powers back up again. It's like it gets its second and third wind every time it approaches a town, which is just insanity. So it reaches EF4 intensity once again, tears directly through the small community of Cambridge Shores, located along the western shore of Kentucky Lake. Numerous homes were completely leveled in this town, including multiple large lakeside homes that were flattened or swept away. Numerous large trees were snapped, debarked, denuded, or just completely ripped up out of the ground. And vehicles were thrown in this area as well. A fire department building had its roof torn off, and a large metal boat storage buildings were also destroyed. The tornado then weakened, we've heard that before, but remained strong as it crossed over Kentucky Lake into Lyon County. Now, as it crosses over a body of water, for a brief time that it's over a body of water, it becomes a water spout. And then when it crosses out of the water and then back on the land, it becomes a land spout once again. So it moved through the Land Between the Lakes National Recreation Area, mowing down a large swath of trees and snapping power poles at EF2 strength as it passed near Twin Lakes before crossing Lake Barkley. After it did so, the tornado strengthened back to EF3 intensity as it crossed Kentucky 93 and I-24 near the eastern shore of the lake, where many additional homes sustained major damage or were destroyed, including several that were leveled or swept from their foundations. And then it intensified again, and it was back up to EF4 intensity once again, crossing into Caldwell County along Kentucky 293, producing EF4 damage as it impacted the southern edge of Princeton, where another tornado emergency was issued. Dozens of homes were destroyed along the southern and southeastern fringes of town, especially at the Princeton Golf and Country Club subdivision, where several houses were leveled or swept away. The University of Kentucky Research Center was destroyed, with metal roof trusses carried hundreds of yards from the structure and wrapped around trees. Well, at least those trees will be protected for winter, I guess. I don't know. It's just absolutely mind-blowing to me how, I've been watching and looking at, tornado footage, still photos for a long time, and it honestly still fascinates me how just the damage that these things cause. It's just incredible. In addition to all that, cars were thrown from the parking lot into adjacent fields. Metal light poles were ripped from their concrete footings. Not snapped or anything, just ripped from their footings. And ground scouring was noted as well. Trees were stripped of their limbs and partially debarked in and around Princeton. Barns and farm buildings were obliterated. Livestock was killed, and cyclodial markings were left in fields outside of town. 4 fatalities occurred in Princeton, along with numerous injuries. And then the tornado then followed US 62, producing EF2 and EF3 damage to homes in the small communities of Lewistown and Midway. And then seems like a broken record at this point, but as soon as it left Midway, the tornado became violent and reached EF4 strength yet again. This is like the 4th or 5th time where it got to EF4 strength, weakened, came back up, weakened, came back up, weakened, and now it's at EF4 strength yet again as it moves along US 62 and produces catastrophic damage as it made a direct hit on the city of Dawson Springs. So yet another direct hit of a city. This city is located along the Caldwell-Hopkins County line. A fourth tornado emergency was in effect for Dawson Springs and St. Charles as the storm moved through the area. Residential areas in the northern part of Dawson Springs were devastated, with entire blocks of homes destroyed, many of which were leveled or swept from their foundations. Common occurrence with this tornado in particular. Cars were thrown, copious amounts of structural debris were strewn in all directions, countless trees were shredded and debarked, and only rubble remained in the hardest hit neighborhoods. The Dawson Village apartment complex was totally destroyed. Several two-story brick apartment buildings, try saying that 5 times fast, sustained EF4 damage there, being largely reduced to rubble with only a few first-floor interior walls left intact. However, Timothy Marshall, who is a meteorologist and a structural and forensics engineer, Christine L. Welgos, a meteorologist at the National Weather Service of Paducah, and Brian E. Smith, a meteorologist at the National Weather Service of Omaha, later published a damage survey from Dawson Springs, which rated this apartment complex as mid-EF3 intensity, with winds estimated at 155 miles per hour due to structural flaws that were found. Numerous vehicles were thrown into piles in the parking lot of the complex. Several duplexes were destroyed at Clarkdale Court, including one that was leveled with only a pile of debris remaining. An American Legion post and a car wash were flattened, while a church and a medical clinic sustained major damage. Some logistics facilities and warehouses were leveled in an industrial park as the tornado exited town, and several metal self-storage unit buildings and large garages were obliterated nearby. 14 people were killed in the Dawson Springs area and many others were injured. A mother and her 3 children survived with relatively minor injuries by hanging onto a mattress as they were thrown 200 feet through the air into a field after the tornado swept their Dawson Springs home from its foundation. God, imagine that. Trying to hang on to this mattress as you're thrown 200 feet through the air into a field. Like, whew. Gives you chills just thinking about it. In addition to that, a photograph was lofted from a destroyed house in Dawson Springs and transported almost 130 miles by the intense tornadic updraft, eventually being found in New Albany, Indiana. Yeah. Southwest of Dawson Springs, a group of storm chasers photographed a possible satellite tornado associated with the parent tornado. Now you're probably wondering, what the hell is a satellite tornado? Basically, it's a smaller tornado that typically rotates around the bigger axis. Usually associated with extremely violent and powerful tornadoes that are EF4 or EF5 strength. However, the National Weather Service did not confirm this. The tornado would weaken slightly to high-end EF3 strength, but was continuing to cause major damage as it tracked to the northeast beyond Dawson Springs, passing north of Isley and through the rural community of Carbondale. Farm outbuildings and mobile homes were demolished, and multiple houses sustained major damage or were destroyed, some of which were flattened. Additional high-end EF3 damage occurred, and another tornado emergency was issued as it moved through Barnsley, just south of Arlington, and Helka, and just north of Morton's Gap. Almost every house in the small community was damaged or destroyed, including some that were leveled, although they were not well constructed. A train on the CSX freight line adjacent to US 41 in the town derailed and 25 multi-ton freight cars were derailed, several of which were thrown from the tracks, including one that was tossed into a house. I hope nobody was in that house, because holy crap. Imagine a freight car being thrown into a house. Like, whew. That's insane. Thousands of large trees were mowed down and vehicles were flipped. Past Barnsley, the tornado crossed over another CSX freight line and I-69 before passing through an unpopulated swampy area where more large trees were snapped or uprooted and damage was rated EF2. Then it continued into northern Muhlenberg County, where another tornado emergency was issued for the community of Bremen. As the tornado approached from the southwest, much like all the other towns, and much like all the other towns, it abruptly intensified to high-end EF4 strength. This tornado had a mind of its own. It crossed and paralleled Kentucky 175 through the north side of town. Many homes were destroyed along this portion of the path, including several that were obliterated and completely swept away, with little debris remaining. Large trees sustained severe denuding and debarking, grass was scoured from the ground, and vehicles were thrown through the air and severely mangled. Some of the worst damage in Bremen occurred along Bethlehem Cemetery Road, where a row of 4 homes were completely obliterated, with debris scattered and windrowed long distances through fields across the street. Concrete floor slabs were torn from the foundation of one home and shattered, where the paved driveway of another residence was cracked and scoured. Now imagine that. Concrete floor slabs were torn from a foundation of one home and shattered completely. Again, are you telling me this is not EF5 strength? Like, come on. Give me a break. I think this was very clearly an EF5 tornado, and it probably should have been given the EF5 rating. Why it wasn't, I will never know. I will never understand. Because it seems to me all the evidence is there. This cat. Houses that were farther away from the center of the damage path sustained roof and exterior wall loss, while mobile homes, barns, garages, and outbuildings were also destroyed. Bethlehem Baptist Church had one of its brick exterior walls blown out and was shifted off of its foundation slightly, while Church Street General Baptist Church lost much of its roof. Among the fatalities was District Judge Brian Crick, who represented Muhlenberg and McLean counties, as confirmed in a statement from the Supreme Court of Kentucky on December the 11th. Some weakening occurred, but significant damage continued after the tornado exited Bremen and crossed US 431 south of Stroud, where some homes and mobile homes were damaged or destroyed, and hundreds of large trees were snapped and denuded. Damage in this area was rated EF2 to low-end EF3. Then, after it passed near the Muhlenberg-McLean County line, the tornado weakened substantially as it crossed into Ohio County at 11:10 p.m., producing EF1 damage as it traversed rugged, hilly terrain to the west of Centertown. It moved through an abandoned coal strip mine, overturning a large section of a coal conveyor belt, snapping many trees and downing power poles. So obviously, even at EF1 level intensity, it was still, doing some pretty significant damage. A few farm outbuildings were also damaged or destroyed in this area. It became strong again north of Centertown along Kentucky 85, producing EF2 damage as multiple homes and outbuildings were damaged or destroyed, including a well-built house that had much of its roof torn off and sustained collapse of an exterior wall. 5 large chicken houses were destroyed, and hundreds of large hardwood trees were snapped and uprooted along a quarter-mile wide swath along this section of the path. Weakening back to EF1 intensity, the tornado downed trees along Carter Ferry Road and Mud College Road. But then the tornado entered a flatter area to the west of Hartford and began to intensify once more. and large steel power poles were bent or broken along Johnson School Road, earning an EF3 rating. It crossed US 231, I-165, and Kentucky 69 north of Hartford, along with the Rough River 3 times. Homes and businesses sustained significant EF3 damage in this area, and 2 tractor trailers were lifted and thrown 40 yards, with one of the cabs being badly mangled. Large barns and garages were completely demolished, and a small brick office structure was destroyed, along with homes, very large silos, and a fertilizer storage facility. The last area of EF3 strength damage occurred along Kentucky 69 and Oatley Drive, northeast of Hartford, where a poorly anchored brick block foundation home was swept away and completely destroyed, and other houses nearby sustained total loss of their roofs and exterior walls. 2 anchored mobile homes were also swept away and destroyed, with their frames tossed and bent, one of which was thrown 100 yards away. An RV camper was thrown 30 yards in this area as well, landing upside down, while tractors and large hay bales were also thrown considerable distances. Damage of up to high-end EF2 intensity occurred beyond this point as the tornado crossed Humble Valley Road, Halls Creek Road, and Mount Vernon Road before passing north of Olaton. Homes were significantly damaged, barns and mobile homes were destroyed, a cow was killed, and thousands of large hardwood trees were downed. The tornado paralleled the Ohio-Grayson County line and very briefly crossed a bend in the Rough River into Grayson County. Hundreds of trees were downed along Cane Ford Road, and an abandoned trailer home was destroyed. The tornado then crossed Kentucky 54, where the last area of EF2 damage occurred, as a frail home was destroyed and left with only a few walls standing, and large trees were snapped, one of which fell on and destroyed a car. Some outbuildings were also damaged or destroyed in this area. Entering Breckinridge County at EF1 intensity, it paralleled the Breckinridge-Grayson County line and passed over Kentucky 110 northwest of Falls of Rough. Hundreds of trees were downed in this area, and a couple of structures sustained minor damage. It downed power lines as it crossed Kentucky 79 at EF0 strength, where it damaged a large boat storage facility and scattered sheet metal debris 300 yards to the northeast, across the runway of a small airport. Some additional minor tree damage occurred before the tornado finally dissipated near Park Drive in Grayson County at 11:48 p.m. Central, as it entered Rough River Dam State Resort Park near Rough River Lake, approximately 4 miles west of McDaniels. Man, that is quite the journey, to say the least. So, some stats on this tornado. The tornado reached a peak width of 1.5 miles and was on the ground for nearly 3 hours, tracking, I said earlier it was 165.9, it's actually 165.6 miles, from Woodland Mills to Rough River Dam State Resort Park. The path was the 9th longest in recorded history. It was rated high-end EF4 with an estimated peak wind speed of 190 miles per hour. 57 people were killed in this tornado. 515 were injured. Over 5,000 homes were destroyed, and it caused $300 million in damage. With a confirmed death toll of 57, it was the deadliest single tornado in the United States since the Joplin, Missouri tornado 10 years earlier. There was a quote-unquote 58th fatality, but it was the result of a heart attack while clearing debris and is listed as indirect. Now, I have been saying all throughout this that based on all the stuff that I had been reading, this tornado should have been given the EF5 rating. Well, as a matter of fact, there were actually a couple of meteorologists that noted the damage as well. In 2022, Timothy Marshall, a meteorologist, structural and forensic engineer, Zachary B. Winhoff with Hag Engineering Company, and Christine L. Wiglos, a meteorologist at the National Weather Service of Paducah, and Brian E. Smith, a meteorologist at the National Weather Service of Omaha. They published a damage survey of portions of the tornado's track, particularly through Mayfield and Dawson Springs. The report notes that the tornado damage rating might have been higher had more wind-resistant structures been encountered. Also, the fast-forward speed of the tornado had little dwell time of strong winds over a building, and thus the damage likely would have been more severe if the tornado were slower. Yeah, this tornado had basically a forward speed of, an average forward speed of around 50 to 55 miles per hour. Because it was able to traverse 165 miles in less than 3 hours. So, according to all these meteorologists, had more wind-resistant structures been encountered, this tornado would have probably been given the EF4 rating. Ain't that about some shit? Now, I had mentioned before that one of the longest lasting impressions from this tornado has been the result of a lawsuit against the Mayfield Candle Factory. As I said, we were going to circle back around to it, so here we are. Now, as it turned out, there were accusations that factory management prohibited workers from leaving the candle factory in Mayfield before the tornado struck, were reported on December the 13th. Workers said they were told by management, if you leave, you're more than likely to be fired.
I had to climb up to get out because once the rescuers did come, they told me that they couldn't move the air conditioning unit because there were about 5 feet of debris on top of it. So eventually, the way they got us all out was we had to climb up all that debris, climb across beams and debris that had shifted, that was stationary.
The desperate search lasted for 4 days until every person was accounted for, those who survived and those who didn't.
Father, thank you for who he is and what he's done.
A Graves County deputy jailer among the dead.
Father, I want to pray right now for this family, Lord.
There were funerals that I was unable to attend because mentally I couldn't.
1 year later, all that's left of the Mayfield Candle Factory is the concrete foundation. No sign of the chaos, no sign of the tragedy from December 10th.
It's almost as if it never was. And you know, that wasn't a dream, that wasn't a nightmare, it was a part of my life.
And part of this town's history that will never be forgotten.
On December the 17th, it was reported that multiple workers at the candle factory filed a lawsuit against Mayfield Consumer Products in state court, seeking compensation and punitive damages. The lawsuit alleges that the factory had up to 3.5 hours to let workers leave as safety precautions and did not. And the company showed a flagrant indifference to the rights of workers and violated the Kentucky Occupational Safety and Health Workplace Standards by refusing evacuations. Ironically enough, the following January, the factory closed and Mayfield Consumer Products laid off approximately 250 workers there, shifting operations and remaining workers to a new plant in the nearby town of Hickory. Yeah, that's not suspicious at all, huh? A second lawsuit was filed against Mayfield Consumer Products on December the 8th, 2022 on behalf of 3 workers who perished in the candle factory collapse and 7 who survived. The charges include false imprisonment, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and violation of Kentucky statutory law.
When the tornado actually hit, a coworker and I had ducked into an office, and we were sitting with our backs against the wall, and we could feel it grab us. The wind started shifting us around the room. I remember just holding on to Jamie and telling him not to let go of me, that I didn't want to be separated. We turned the radio on and we could hear people screaming for help. Some people were unresponsive. People were terrified. Everyone was trapped. I didn't know what to say to him.
Yeah.
I didn't know what to say.
You don't know what to say.
When I first arrived, the only thing I had knowledge of is that Charlotte was trapped. So I rolled up thinking it was just trees and debris, and it was leveled. The sounds that I was hearing was like a war zone, people crying and begging for help. It's a hard thing to put into perspective.
I was on the phone with my son, trying to describe to him where I was so that he could hopefully, have more direction on where to find me. And when they did, he would scream, or he would tell me to scream. So we would scream, and apparently they could not hear us. So he walked away, and that was terrifying. I thought, he was right here, and now he's going somewhere else. When they came back, we could feel them walking on top of us. And that's when I started panicking, because I felt like they were going to cave it in on top of us.
I had no idea of where anybody was. I just ran into where I thought I was needed. We got the people that we could get out, and got out safely so that other personnel could help more people in need.
I'm very lucky. I have very few injuries. I have a bruise on my arm, and I have a sore back. I lost my car. That's it. I feel very, very blessed when so many other people have lost so much more.
In the wake of the tornado and the Mayfield Candle Factory controversy, there were actually several people who were interviewed by news outlets in the preceding days about what happened in the Mayfield Candle Factory collapse. And needless to say, it was a rough watch, because I watched some of those news broadcasts on YouTube and researched for this episode, and it was rough. It was a rough watch. In fact, there was one where one of the 8 people who were killed at the candle factory was actually a father of 8. And that him and his wife were actually working at the factory that night because they were actually saving up to buy a house. And he was one of the 8 people who were killed in the candle factory collapse that night.
Mark Saxton is still in disbelief.
I don't see how nobody can be okay after this.
On Friday night, he was working the forklift, one of 110 employees on the evening shift at the Mayfield Consumer Products Candle Factory, when in a matter of seconds, a tornado brought the building to the ground. Chilling video, shot in darkness by another worker, shows a harrowing scene after it fell.
Somebody please send us some help. We are trapped.
Rescuers pulled Mark out of the rubble, but he lost family and friends inside.
People were screaming, "Mark, help." I couldn't even get to him.
Autumn Kirks and her boyfriend Joe Ward were working inside too. She was able to escape.
I had a savior. I don't know who it was, but he lifted a concrete wall off me.
But Joe tragically didn't make it. We spoke to her when Joe was still among the missing.
He was within 10 feet of me in that hallway.
The couple started at the factory just a few weeks ago, working to save for a house. Together they have 8 kids.
I'm so sorry.
Trying to be strong for them that's the only thing keeping me going right now is my kids.
Denise Cunningham's 21-year-old son Devin was also working that night. She called him immediately when the tornado hit. He was alive, but trapped.
I called him and a girl answered the phone and all you could hear screams for asking for help. And my son couldn't get on the phone because he's trapped between those 2 walls. And they're all screaming for help. All she could tell me was that my son told me that he loved me, that he didn't think he was going to make it.
That coworker stayed with Devin until rescuers appeared.
She was down there holding his hand and trying to keep him conscious, and They opened up the hole, they got everybody out, and she thought they were going to grab him too, and then they just left it.
Late Sunday, Denise learned Devin was gone. Given the weather warnings, she thinks no one should have been inside the factory that night.
They knew it was coming. I am more than angry. I think that they should be held accountable for everything that's happened to these families, for my son.
The factory's owner telling me the historic storm was just too fast and too unpredictable.
If you knew the weather was coming, was there any thought to maybe suspending production?
If we believe that we could do anything differently, in hindsight, of course, I think all of us would do something differently. It's such a gamble to say leave, because the last thing you do, it says don't get in your car. That's what experts say. And
now he says they're focused on employees and supporting the loved ones of those lost.
Every ounce of me and my family and our executive team are thinking about the families that right now are not waking up as fortunate as you and I. And that's where all of our focus is.
I mean, you listen to that young man crying for his father and knowing that he is never going to see his father again, and his father is never going to have the opportunity to see him grow up into a man himself. And all of this just honestly pisses me off even further, because if the allegations are true, then that whole leadership team needs to be held accountable for all those people who were killed. 8 people were killed in that candle factory that night, when in reality, it should have been 0. If they had that much leeway to get those people to safety, then they deserve everything that should come their way, because that is negligence. And they should fully be held responsible for what happened that night. But speaking of the lawsuit, this is the most recent news that we have on it. It's October the 8th at the time that I am recording this. But the most recent news that we have on this lawsuit is all the way back on March the 17th of this year. Now, the judge, who is U.S. District Judge Benjamin Beaton, he denied the claims of false imprisonment and intentional infliction of emotional distress. However, he ruled that the claims of false light and defamation by the plaintiffs against factory owner Mayfield Consumer Products could proceed. So, yeah, that was pretty big news. I mean, because defamation can be kind of hard to prove, but in a news release, Amos Jones, who represents the 8 workers in the suit, well, at least the first 8 workers, expressed confidence that they would prove their case in court. Across the Commonwealth, naysayers who didn't know the facts were publicly offering doomsday assessments that there was no way these employees could proceed on any legal theory, and these loudmouths popped up as soon as we filed suit days after the factory collapsed on those laborers. Today, though, the truth came out. This case is alive and well. These folks are still hurting, and with collection agency action involved, we are pursuing a full court press, said William Nevsker, another attorney representing the workers. The ruling comes 16 months after the Western Kentucky tornado tore through Mayfield, and on the night of December 10th, 110 people were working in the Mayfield Consumer Products factory when a powerful EF4 tornado ripped through the town. The candle factory collapsed, leaving many workers trapped under the rubble and killing 8 of them. In March 2022, 8 other living former employees sued MCP. The plaintiffs claimed their supervisors threatened them with termination if they left work during the storm. The lawsuit also accused Bob Ferguson, who served as a spokesperson for MCP in the aftermath of the tornadoes, of defaming and portraying several employees in a false light by publicly contradicting their claims about what happened at the candle factory. In December 2021, Ferguson told multiple media outlets that employees were able to leave the factory contrary to the claims they were making. So if an employee felt it was in their best interest to leave, they certainly had that option. Then, 9 months later, 10 other employees filed a suit that mirrors the first lawsuit. Described as a mass action lawsuit by their attorneys, they allege MCP retaliated against employees in misleading and denying certain benefits to them, such as insurance claims in the storm's aftermath. The mass action lawsuit also alleges that MCP and Supervisor Justin Bobbitt are liable for the events of December 10, 2021. That suit joins the original 8 workers, making 18 named plaintiffs, and remains fully intact in state court. The second case is also pending before Judge Beaton after it was removed from federal court. But what I will say about the whole, being threatened with your job if you were to leave, here's the thing. The onus is honestly on the workers at that point. And trust me, I can understand that for some it was their livelihood. But there's an old saying from a show that I used to watch a long time ago, where basically there was a similar situation that came up. And the hero of the show was like, it's your job or your life. Which is more important to you? Now, obviously, the choice should be obvious because, maybe you will lose your job. But in this case, you would live to see the next day. The sun will rise, and you can always find another job. You only get one life, however, and once you lose it, that's it. There's no reset button, nothing like that. I would have erred on the side of caution and dealt with the aftermath afterwards. But that's just me. And as of right now, as far as I can tell, there has not been any resolution to this. I have not seen any updates since that story. So as far as I can tell, it's still ongoing. I would imagine they're still waiting for it to be heard in court. But these former employees that now have this lawsuit going forward against the Mayfield Candle Factory, they've got this company by the balls. And if I were them, I would not let go until a settlement is reached to their liking. Now, I would imagine that the owners of the candle factory, they may be weighing the options at this point and maybe considering settling with these factory workers. Because I can tell you this much, if this actually goes to court and the candle factory workers win, it's going to cost the owners of the candle factory a hell of a lot more money than they would if they would try to settle. So, that's just my thoughts on that. Like I said, there's nothing else that I can see that other than what we saw on March the 17th. There hasn't been any updates to it. So as far as I know, it's still ongoing. So hopefully in the near future, this will reach a resolution. Until then, all we can do is just watch and wait. And thus ends the tale of the 2021 Western Kentucky tornado. This is probably going to easily be one of the longest episodes I've done so far. There was a lot of research that went into this one. Looking into things, and it's just like, wow, this rabbit hole went a lot deeper than I thought it would. We all knew that this was a devastating tornado going in, but good Lord. There's just so many layers to this. And the story is still not finished because that lawsuit is still ongoing as far as we know. Hopefully, personally, I hope that those former workers, they get the compensation that they deserve. And I hope that the people responsible for their negligence in this situation, I hope they get what's coming to them. And that's how I feel about that. But anyways, that's going to do it for this edition of Tornado Tales. Thank you very much for watching. The next one that I'm going to be covering is, another very devastating and extremely powerful tornado. In fact, it holds the title for the costliest tornado in world history. Of course, I'm talking about the 2011 Joplin, Missouri EF4. That's going to be on the next episode. But anyways, thank you very much for watching this edition of Tornado Tales. And until next time, this is the PackerMan signing out. See you later. What's happening, ladies and germs? Thank you for watching tonight's video. If you're interested in sponsoring the channel, there is a link to my Patreon down in the description box below. Otherwise, hit like and subscribe if you want to continue watching great content like you saw today. Thank you very much for watching, and until next time, this is the PackerMan signing out.